We've reached the Week 11 bye. Which defenders have stood out for the Seahawks? Rob Rang and I are going to be dishing out our edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks. Joining me as always, my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. No crossover Thursday this week because the Seahawks do not have an opponent. I don't know that there's ever going to be a crossover Thursday bye week edition. Maybe we can come up with that next year. But we've got our mid-season grade cards. I touched on offense on Tuesday's episode. Rob and I are going to be looking at the 5 main positional groups on defense and dishing out our grades here at the midway point of the season. Should be a jam-packed episode coming your way, courtesy of Prize Picks. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks are entering the bye week riding a 6-4 record. They've won 4 of their past 5 games. And one of the Seahawks have had so much success over the past month plus has been the emergence of rookie running back Ken Walker III, who's probably the favorite to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Maybe Dameon Pierce of the Texans in the mix there. Breece Hall for the Jets was before he tore his ACL. But right now, Walker looks like he's the front runner. He's really brought juice to that run game. He's also made some nice catches out of the backfield. And yet, here we are this week, the Seahawks on a bye, Rob, and they were attempting to add more depth to their running back group from a division rival. The Cardinals, somewhat surprisingly, releasing Eno Benjamin, who's had a pretty solid season up to this point. The Seahawks were one of 4 teams, according to Field Yates of ESPN, that put in a waiver claim. Unfortunately, since they're 6-4, they're near the bottom of that waivers list, and the Houston Texans, of all teams, with Dameon Pierce as their lead running back, were the ones that were awarded him. And really, this was one that kind of had me kind of baffled a little bit, but the Seahawks have shown the last few years you could never have too many talented running backs because of the injury attrition at that position.
Yeah, and that to me is what made it such a fascinating move from the Seahawks, just putting that claim in the first place. Now, of course, Eno Benjamin played his college ball at Arizona State, so in the Pac-12, and the Seahawks are, of course, very, very familiar with that. And then, as you mentioned, he played with the Arizona Cardinals, and, considering that the Seahawks have played 2 games against Arizona this year, and, of course, in previous years, a divisional rival, they're going to be very familiar with Eno Benjamin. But as you said, I mean, Seattle's got to feel really good about their backfield. They've got a superstar in Ken Walker III. They've got 2 really solid backs here in DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. Oh, by the way, Rashad Penny as well, obviously on IR at this point. But it feels like running back is one of Seattle's strongest positions. So why would they be going for a player like Eno Benjamin? And to me, what it comes down to is that Eno Benjamin is a legitimate NFL starting caliber player. And so I think that it's interesting that Seattle was willing to put in this waiver claim. They probably realized that they weren't going to be able to get him, that it might create some talk out there, that it might push DJ Dallas and Travis Homer like, oh my goodness, we got to look over our shoulder. They are still looking to compete at that position. And that's exactly the point, is the Seahawks are still looking to compete at every position. So I think that general manager John Schneider deserves a great deal of credit. I think the Seahawks pro scouts, who that's their job, to be evaluating these players from other teams all the time, they deserve some credit. Certainly Pete Carroll, he's the one that kind of brought in that always compete mantra. Even the owner, Jody Allen, she deserves some credit. I mean, she is the one who basically said, gave Seattle, or gave the John Schneider and Pete Carroll the permission, frankly, to trade Russell Wilson during the offseason. Just this, if you're going to compete, then let's compete. And that's one of the things I think is kind of important about Seattle's decision to put in that waiver claim with Eno Benjamin. Obviously, it wound up not being successful. As you mentioned, the Houston Texans, the team with the highest, the lowest record and therefore the highest bid placement, was able to get this player. But this is an intriguing back. This is a guy who does play downhill. He has good hands out of the backfield. He's a good football player. He is a guy that would make most NFL rosters. I'm completely shocked that the Arizona Cardinals decide to release him at this point in the season, considering the fact that their starting running back, James Conner, as good as he is, and he's a terrific player, but as good as he is, he has struggled with durability. So to me, it's very encouraging that the Seahawks are still looking to compete in every single possible way. And that's exactly what I would think that Seahawks fans would want their club to be doing, especially in a bye week. They are showing that they are all in this season, especially if they can steal from a divisional foe.
I guess I looked at it this way. Once I kind of stepped back and thought about why they put that claim in, yes, they have Travis Homer, they have DJ Dallas, they got a couple guys they like on their practice squad. Tony Jones Jr., they got off waivers from the New Orleans Saints early this year, a bigger bodied back that can catch the football a little bit. I mean, the Seahawks have some depth, but Eno Benjamin was having a pretty solid year. He had 299 rushing yards. He was averaging 4.3 yards per carry, a couple of touchdowns, and he had caught 24 passes out of the backfield. And this is a guy that, if you look at him physically, he doesn't look like he would be a power back. He's not a big running back. But I remember watching Arizona State, and this is a guy that was constantly bowling through tacklers. He was dragging tacklers, picking up extra yardage after contact, and you could always see the pass catching ability in Arizona State's offense as well. And so this is a kid that I really liked coming out of ASU. And so I can see why the Seahawks would be intrigued by him, especially with the fact this has been a position where if you have somehow an injury, God forbid, to Ken Walker III, and then you're stuck with DJ Dallas and Travis Homer as your top two, I don't know that either one of those guys are necessarily full-time starting running backs in the NFL. They're really good complementary receivers. Eno Benjamin, though, can be a starter in this league, as you mentioned. So I guess I'm not as surprised now that I'm thinking about it that they made this move, but I'm glad you pointed out Jody Allen and kind of the way that attitude with making that move, dealing Russell Wilson and putting Pete Carroll, as he termed it in March, right after that trade happened, back in his wheelhouse, back in John Schneider's wheelhouse, where they're building a young football team and they're using the draft to do that and bringing in some hungry free agents like Uchenna Nwosu. We have seen that always compete mindset come back to the forefront. And I think there's a couple examples that I can throw out there real quick that kind of tell you the Seahawks got that edge back this offseason. Mike Jackson at left corner. Mike Jackson was a long shot going into training camp to win a roster spot, but he impressed from day one. And by the time they got to the end of the preseason, he was working with the ones across from Tariq Woolen. He earned that opportunity, and Sidney Jones is now on the Raiders for that reason, because he couldn't get his starting job back from Mike Jackson. That is the always compete mantra in perfection right there. And we've seen it up front, bringing back Bruce Irvin, and he's earned those reps that he's had there. Boye Mafe and some of these other rookies that had to fight their way into the starting lineup, they earned those opportunities. And so it does feel like Pete Carroll has been emboldened a little bit. There's been that trickle effect down from the owner with that move saying, I have confidence in my coach and my general manager to be able to build this team back up and be competitive quickly, even without Russell Wilson. We're going to go with culture over the star quarterback. And that's paid off. And really, that always compete mantra, as I just said, it just seems like that has re-permeated within the entire organization, and you are seeing it bear fruits on the football field.
You really are. And again, that's one of the reasons why I really like this move. I mean, I love the move I love the decision when Seattle brought back Bruce Irvin. Long time Locked On Seahawks fans know that. I mean, I was ecstatic when they brought Bruce Irvin back. I was ecstatic when they brought in Adrian Peterson a year ago, not because I really thought that either player was going to be able to make the impact that they did. Adrian Peterson, of course, had some splashy plays, had his touchdown for the Seahawks, but it was more what his athleticism, what his effort, what his just incredible talent, but also, again, that effort, how that pushed Rashad Penny. I think you're seeing that, that type of grit that Bruce Irvin always personified, how we have seen the Seahawks defense completely turn around here. And I would not be surprised at all if just the threat of somebody else coming into Seattle's backfield is going to push Seattle's running backs to run that much harder, to be that much more reliable in pass protection as receivers, perhaps as punt and kick returners, where we have talked about that there's been some concerns here a little bit. We talked about just in earlier episode this week about what is our biggest concern, the run defense or the running game. I think that it showed that the Seahawks are concerned about their running game as well. To me, this is a shot across the bow that the Seahawks need to improve, or otherwise there are going to be reinforcements coming in. So again, I just love the signal that this is making to the Seahawks players and to the Seahawks fans out there that they are looking to win. They're not surprised that they are in first place at this point. They want to be in first place, not just now. They want to be in first place in February.
And these shouldn't really be surprising moves when you consider John Schneider's history, like claiming DJ Reed off of waivers a few years ago from the 49ers. Like, they like to pick up players off of rival teams. And it is something that Schneider's done frequently. He's had quite a bit of success doing that. And so they would have loved to get Eno Benjamin, but unfortunately they were near the bottom of the waiver wire, so didn't have an opportunity to claim him. The Houston Texans get him instead. Coming up next, we're going to get to our midseason defensive report card. We're going to be looking at edge rushers, defensive tackles, and inside linebackers coming up in the next segment. How did all three positional groups grade out? Find out here in a moment on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or want to let your love sparkle, Blue Nile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. And Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tool lets you choose the diamond shape, size, clarity, as well as the setting style. And Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then help you handcraft her perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. Looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, but still having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts that are on hand 24/7, either by phone or chat, to help you find a memorable gift at every budget so you can shop stress-free. With Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee, all Blue Nile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging, and they also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use the code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. This episode is also brought to you by Tommy John. Getting stuck in Black Friday crowds, super uncomfortable? Shopping Tommy John's. Black Friday sale from your couch, that's super duper comfortable. When you give your loved ones Tommy John, they're that much more comfortable so they can do everything better. Shop Tommy John's Black Friday sale right now and give the gift of comfort to everyone on your list, including yourself, with brand new Tommy John underwear, loungewear, and pajamas. With over 18 million pairs sold, giving Tommy John has become a holiday tradition. 97% of women and men love getting a gift from Tommy John. That's why Tommy John doesn't just have customers, they have fanatics. I personally love wearing Tommy John because they're beyond comfortable. And for me, they're not just stay-at-home apparel either. You should get Tommy John too. Every gift is backed by Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or it's free guarantee. So shop Tommy John's Black Friday sale going on right now and get 30% off site-wide at TommyJohn.com/lockedon. 30% off everything right now at TommyJohn.com/lockedon. That's TommyJohn.com/lockedon. See the site for details. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Joining me as always, my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s out there who make Locked On Seahawks their first listen 5 days a week. And for our new listeners, welcome aboard. Glad to have you listening to Locked On Seahawks. And for your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, it's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Rob, it's midseason report card time. Unfortunately, I had to do the offensive side of the ball by myself on Tuesday night, but we get to bring you back into the fold to talk about our favorite side of the football, and that is the defensive side of the ball. And let's start in the trenches with one of the premium positions in football, and that is the edge rushing position, or in this case, the outside linebackers for the Seahawks in their hybrid 3-4 defense. Obviously, Rob, there were very high expectations for this group going into the season with Uchenna Nwosu coming over as a free agent, Darrell Taylor looking like he was primed for a breakout season, Boye Mafe coming into the second-round pick, Alton Robinson was coming back. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to see him play yet this year, but we certainly have gotten to see Uchenna Nwosu and some of these other players really stand out. And, of course, Bruce Irvin as well. So when I was grading this group, I had to give them a solid B because I think Nwosu by himself is probably an A. I think he's a Pro Bowl, maybe even an all-pro caliber player with the numbers he's putting up right now. Boye Mafe's had a solid rookie year. But they've had some disappointing performances from Darrell Taylor, who lost his starting job. There's been some injuries there. So while this group has been good, it feels like they haven't quite played up to potential, at least in my book. So I'm giving them a solid B.
Yeah, I have to agree with that B grade for this group as a whole. And I would 100% agree with the A that you just mentioned for Uchenna Nwosu. I think that he has been as comfortable in Seattle's new scheme as if he was wearing a pair of Tommy Johns, because my goodness, I mean, just how quickly he was able to make that transition from the Los Angeles Chargers scheme to Seattle's was one of the reasons why I was really excited about that signing. And of course, he played in a 3-4 defense, not only with the Los Angeles Chargers, but he kind of dabbled in it a little bit at USC. And he just played with the mindset, both with the Chargers and with the USC Trojans, that I really thought would allow him to be a better NFL player than he was a college player. As we've talked about, he's still a very young player. I think he's only 26 years old at this point. And so considering the fact that he's been in the league for a while now, again, he came into the NFL as kind of a pup. We talked about this with Rasheem Green a couple of years ago. It was one of the reasons why I always thought that he was still just kind of scratching the surface of his potential. But with all due respect to Rasheem Green, while I just love the athletic upside that his athletic ability and his age might give him, he never played with the just sheer nastiness and physicality that Uchenna Nwosu has. So to me, I think pushes up Seattle's grade here at this point, because you're absolutely right. Darrell Taylor has been a disappointment. I do think that he is at his best, just pinning his ears back and rushing upfield as an edge rusher, but we have not seen the number of sacks that I was expecting. He has not been able to show a great deal of physicality at the point of attack to be able to hold up and run support, but that's something that Boye Mafe, in my opinion, has actually kind of played better in that regard than I thought that he would. You mentioned Bruce Irvin. That, again, is an addition that I was really excited about because, again, he plays with that same kind of edge to him that I think that the really great defenses in all of the NFL, and certainly those in Seattle that have played very well under Pete Carroll, have always had. Bruce Irvin has that in spades. I'm excited about Alton Robinson. Love to see him back on the field for the Seahawks. I think a solid B grade, I think, is fair, but I also feel like there is room for improvement. That's one of the biggest reasons why I'm excited about where Seattle's pass rush could be a couple of weeks from now.
And I think that this grade gets bolstered by the fact that Darrell Taylor has played much better since they put him into a situational role. We've seen him have several forced fumbles, strip sacks, one of them against the Chargers that he actually recovered and almost took it back for a touchdown. So he has been playing better in a reserve role, while Boye Mafe and Bruce Irvin have been taking more reps because they're better run defenders at this point. So you got to hope that Darrell Taylor grows into that. Maybe this is a grade that goes up if Taylor has a big second half. He has been playing better as of late, but that group's been solid. Now, let's go to the interior. And before the season, I thought that the defensive tackle group for the Seahawks was going to be one of the biggest strengths for this football team. And maybe that's why I have such a lackluster grade for this group, because while there have been a few guys that have played really well in this group, it hasn't been as well as a collective group. Hasn't been as good as I just can't speak today. Hasn't been as good from a collective standpoint as I expected from a group that's got so much experience. I mean, you get a lot of guys that have started for at least 4 or 5 seasons in the league on this defensive line and played at a high level. And yet early in the season, when they were getting gashed in the run game, one of the big issues was the inconsistency from this front line. They've been better rushing the passer as a group, but for that reason, because there's been an inconsistency, we saw it come back against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday. The front line did not necessarily play well. I can't give any better than a C+ right now, Rob. I look at this group, and Poona Ford, I came into the season believing that he was going to have a chance to finally have that breakout year. We've seen him play well the last 3 years, but he hadn't had that big step forward. Unfortunately, that has not happened. In fact, aside from a couple games recently where he stepped up his level of play, it has really been a disappointing season for Poona Ford in a contract year. Not a lot of pressures from him. His run defense has been very up and down compared to his usual standards. Al Woods has been the immovable object we expect in the middle. Shelby Harris and Quentin Jefferson have been great. I think Shelby Harris has been the best defensive tackle for the Seahawks this year. He has been great. Second on the team in pressures, really good run defender as well. Jefferson's struggled a bit more in that regard, but I just think this group hasn't quite played to the level that we expected as an entire group. And so for that reason, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but C+ is my sweet spot.
I think it's fair. I do think that, I would start off the conversation with Al Woods. I think that what you just said about Shelby Harris is absolutely true. In terms of impact plays, Shelby Harris has been terrific. You think back a couple of months ago when Seattle made that big trade to Russell Wilson, they got Noah Fant, they got the first round pick, they got, Shelby Harris. I mean, obviously they got Drew Lock as well. We talked about everybody but Shelby Harris for much of that trade, or at least a lot of people did. And I think that Shelby Harris has been terrific. But at the same time, I think that Al Woods has been absolutely dominant. I mean, when I'm having a bad day, I think when Seahawks are having a bad day, just watch a little bit of tape of what number 99 is doing. He just ragdolls people in the middle. Now, he is not quick. He is not a guy who is going to generate a great deal of sacks. But if you just want to see a big man just toss people, then my goodness, Al Woods does that just every single play. I mean, when we were talking previously about the trade deadline, I really thought that a team that was really looking to make a Super Bowl run might be talking to the Seahawks about, hey, can we get Al Woods from you? I mean, just literally today, the Philadelphia Eagles signed Ndamukong Suh, just because I think that they are trying to make themselves a Super Bowl run. And I wouldn't have been surprised at all if there were some teams out there who were asking the Seahawks about Al Woods, but Seattle is making a Super Bowl run of their own, obviously here in first place at this point in the season with Thanksgiving right next week. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons why he wasn't moved, but he's been spectacular. But again, going back to what you mentioned about Poona Ford, I would agree with you. I was concerned of all the players on Seattle's roster when we knew that they were going to be making that transition to a 3-4 defense rather than that kind of classic penetrating 4-3. I really thought that Poona Ford might be the guy that might struggle in that transition a little bit, just because he is a little bit undersized. He does not have the frame that you usually associate with defensive linemen who are able to be very effective in the 3-4. So I do think that Poona Ford is one of those players who has played better, similar to what we said before about Darrell Taylor. I think that Miles Adams, a very similarly built kind of a player, also is going to be able to make some plays in some type of situations, but I just don't see them as consistently effective in the 3-4 alignment. Quentin Jefferson, good solid player, but again, not a superstar at this point in his career. So I think a C+ is fair. I probably would bump it up a little bit just because I think that Al Woods, again, has just been dominant at times. So maybe I'm going B-, but it feels like we're splitting hairs at this point. I certainly do not believe that Seattle's defensive tackles have played as well as their edge rushers so far this season.
Yeah, I think we're definitely in agreement on that. There's been more consistency off the edge, at least since they demoted Darrell Taylor to being a situational pass rusher and put Boye Mafe and Bruce Irvin in the role playing edge as real run stuffers off the edge. That's really changed the game for the Seahawks. Real quick, let's get to inside linebacker here. Jordan Brooks, coming off of a record-breaking season in his sophomore year for the Seahawks, breaking the team's franchise record for tackles, got an All-Pro vote. And we talked about this some yesterday. I feel like he's been really solid this year, but I haven't seen him take that step forward away from just racking up tackles that I anticipated that he was going to make in terms of impact plays. Only has one tackle for loss. Dropped a gimme interception for Tom Brady the other day. Has given up several touchdowns on busted coverages. So there have been some plays that have gotten away from it. At the same time, you look at the numbers, though, he's still leading the NFL in total tackles. The guy flies all over the field. And I'm going to give Cody Barton some credit, too. And this is the reason I'm giving the position group a B-. I don't feel like either player has been dominant. And Barton was struggling the first 4 or 5 games of the season. I thought he was terrible in the Falcons' loss in week 3. But since they had the defensive line adjust to playing a bit more aggressive and being more one-gap heavy, penetrating, I've noticed that Cody Barton seems like he's playing more aggressively and is certainly impacting his play from a positive standpoint. He's second on the team in tackles. He got 71 tackles. He got 2 sacks. He's got the interception on Tom Brady last week, which that is not easy to do. Tom Brady does not throw very many passes that are pick-worthy. So the opportunity was there. He took advantage of it. Jordan Brooks didn't. It seems like we're seeing a more confident, more comfortable Cody Barton in recent weeks. So for that reason alone, that's why I'm going B-. If we did this a couple weeks ago, I'm definitely in the C range. The limited depth at the position is something that still concerns me. If either one of those players go down, Tanner Muse is the next one in line. We saw that last week against Tampa Bay when Jordan Brooks exited late in the game with cramps. That is the thing that really concerns me moving forward, is they don't have depth at that position. But I feel like the 2 starters have done a pretty solid job at this point.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. I think that Jordan Brooks, to me, as I argued yesterday, you could make an argument for him being the MVP of this entire team. And I would say that he has not been, or I would agree with you that he has not been a dynamic playmaker, especially behind the line of scrimmage. Although we did see a flash of that against Tampa Bay. When he feels comfortable to kind of knife through the line of scrimmage, he has the instincts and the speed to be able to do that. I also think at times that he has been very hesitant to attack just because of the concerns that we've seen in Seattle's run defense and the fact that you get one guy out of position and suddenly it's a 30, 40, 50, 60 or even more yard touchdown, and so that to me is one of the reasons to me, it feels like he is playing a little bit hesitant at times. And yet, as you mentioned, he's still leading the NFL in tackles. I was critical of Bobby Wagner a year ago because of the fact that he had a bunch of tackles, but didn't have a bunch of impactful plays. I think that Jordan Brooks might be able to raise his level of play over the second half of the season. And to me, that's one of the things I'm most excited about. And I love the fact that you gave Cody Barton a little bit of credit. To me, he is one of the players that I think there's a lot of Seahawks fans out there who just love to bash Cody Barton. I thought it was terrific that he had that interception against Tom Brady, especially when he did on the play that Jordan Brooks was sidelined with those cramps. I mean, what a way to kind of show that, hey, I'm a pretty darn good football player too. I think that you have to expect a little bit more of a transition from a guy who played at Utah as a safety early in his career, or at least as a rover, essentially a safety position, before making that transition to the inside linebacker spot. And that's just going to take some time. He is not an overly physical player. He's athletic and instinctive kind of a guy. And so it has been some transition. But I, again, would agree with you on the fact that I do have reservations about Seattle's depth. I think that Tanner Muse is a good football player. I just don't know that he is a true starting level inside linebacker. And so to me, that's one of the reasons why I do love what Seattle's starters have done. And I have real concerns about what might happen if either Jordan Brooks or Cody Barton were to go down for any type of considerable time. To me, that is a little bit of the Achilles heel of Seattle's defense. And that's why I would agree with a B-, C+, I think grade, I think feels very fair for this unit.
Yeah, that's one concern going into the season that has not dissipated. The depth concerns at linebacker. That is still very much something that is on the radar, a red flag to watch going into the final 7 games. And hopefully they can keep those 2 guys, Jordan Brooks and Cody Barton, healthy. We're going to continue our report card going to the secondary in our 3rd segment. Cornerbacks and safeties. We'll get to those 2 positions coming up next on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting, football, and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Joining me as always, my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. Thanks to all the 12s out there, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. They got the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available in the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Wrapping up our midseason report cards, we've looked at outside linebackers, edge rushers, defensive tackles, and inside linebackers. Now we get to go to the back half of Seattle's defense, the secondary, the cornerbacks and safeties. And there were a lot of question marks at the cornerback position going into the offseason program as well as training camp, Rob, because you lost DJ Reed in free agency. You did bring back Sidney Jones, but you had a lot of turnover at that position once again. Trey Brown, nobody knew when he was going to be back. He just now is going to be making his debut coming out of the bye. And so you had to deal with that issue as well. Nobody really knew who was going to emerge as the starters. And yet, I think you can make an argument that this has been one of the strongest positions for the Seahawks. And they've been playing two rookies for most of the season in Tariq Woolen and Coby Bryant. And Woolen, man, has he been fantastic. Leads all corners in the NFL with 5 interceptions. He's recovered 2 fumbles. He's blocked a field goal that his other corner mate, Mike Jackson, took back for a touchdown. And then Coby Bryant in the slot, 4 forced fumbles this year. He had an interception taken away from him a couple games ago that I think should have been an interception, but it was called back due to a fluky penalty they called on Quandre Diggs. This group has really played well collectively, and I feel like the 2 rookies just continue to get better. And Mike Jackson, I mentioned earlier, he quietly has been one of the unsung heroes of the Seahawks defense and really playing at a high level, 7 pass breakups and only 1 touchdown allowed in coverage. So for this one, Rob, I got to give this group a B+. I almost considered it an A-, but there have been some touchdowns, some missed tackles in there. So maybe my expectations are a little bit too high now with Tariq Woolen and company, but B+ is where I'm going.
Yeah, I think that B+ again is fair. I think you could make an argument for A-. To me, it's kind of funny that quarterback and cornerback sound so similar and their grades are so similar because I think that they really have been the unexpected superstars of this team, the single 2 biggest reasons, at least among the players. Because I certainly want to give a great deal of credit, of course, to Pete Carroll and John Schneider. But among the players, I think that quarterback and cornerback are the 2 biggest reasons why the Seahawks are in first place at this point in the season. Tariq Woolen, I was as excited about him as probably anybody was. Talk about a prospect that NFL draft enthusiasts like myself can get excited about. We've talked so much about his size, his speed, his athletic ability, all these different things. But again, the way that he's played this season has just exceeded anybody's expectations. Look, I don't want to sound silly here. I don't think that Tariq Woolen's mother had any anticipation that he would play as well as he has because he has been phenomenal. Just from the get-go, week 1 against the Denver Broncos, he basically shut down half of the field, and all he's done since then is basically be the best ball hawk in all of the NFL. Not just in terms of the interceptions, but as you said, in terms of the punt, or the field PAT or field goal block, the forced fumbles, and then the way that Coby Bryant, there was all kinds of buzz about Coby Bryant, of course, as the Thorpe Award winner, but to suddenly just kind of be Peanut Tillman reincarnated out there with the way he's punching out the football against really good players. That to me has been one of the real surprises so far of the story. Have they been beaten in coverage? Of course. That's the position. You're going to get beat in coverage sometimes. But the way that Tariq Woolen has really become a very sound run defender, That's one of the reasons I was really struggling with that comparison to Richard Sherman that everybody else out there wanted to just kind of throw out willy-nilly. I think that they both have been spectacular. And then you took the words right out of my mouth as far as Mike Jackson. Again, I was higher on Mike Jackson coming out of Miami than a lot of people were. But I just love the way that he's competed. I'm super excited about what Trey Brown might be able to provide this club. So again, I think the cornerback has arguably been Seattle's strongest positional group as a whole, and certainly their strongest positional group on defense.
Yeah, this one was a no-brainer for me as far as having the highest grade on defense. I feel like this group has been the most consistent, and there's been the most improvement, as you would expect, with a first-time starter, Mike Jackson, and 2 rookies. Obviously, they are first-time starters. And Kobe Bryant hadn't played the slot, really, until he got to the NFL. That is a bit of a shock to the system when you're used to having the boundary next to you. And suddenly, you're in the middle of the field and you got to defend routes to both sides, and the quick receivers, the big receivers, like Mike Evans playing in the slot, that was a challenge and a half for him on Sunday. And yet he hasn't backed down from any of those challenges. And so this group has been really fun to watch, and they're going to continue to get better. All 3 really good young players. And of course, Trey Brown getting back in the mix there. Mike Jackson, you better keep playing well, or number 22 is going to try to get his job back at left corner. And again, it's that always compete mindset. Real quick, now let's go back to the safety position. And before the season, when we did our positional grades, just looking at depth and talent, safety was the highest graded position for the Seahawks. And you and I agreed on that. We both gave them A's because you had Jamal Adams, you had Quandre Diggs, Josh Jones was having a great training game preseason, Ryan Neal returning, Joey Blount making the roster. And yet, this group has been kind of difficult to assess because Jamal Adams played like 5 snaps, got injured, he's done for the season. So we didn't get to see what number 33 was going to look like playing in this hybrid 3-4. I think he would have been fantastic in the scheme. Seeing what we've seen the last 4 or 5 games, I think he would have been wreaking havoc as a blitzer playing that hybrid linebacker spot. Would have been fun to watch, but we didn't get to see that. But what we have gotten to see in the last 5 or 6 weeks, Ryan Neal has played like an all-pro safety in his own right, and we've talked about the stats that he's put up. But looking at these numbers, Rob, 39 tackles, a sack, an interception, 2 forced fumbles. He also has, by the way, 5 additional pass breakups, and most of those numbers have happened in the last 5 weeks. He has been flying all over the field. I'm going to give the safety group a B- because we haven't gotten to see Jamal Adams, unfortunately. Quandre Diggs doesn't have any interceptions yet. His tackling has uncharacteristically been inconsistent. He's missed a lot more tackles than we've seen in the past. And Josh Jones, he has played really well as a situational third safety since being demoted from the starting lineup, but he really struggled before Ryan Neal took over for him, and that was a bit of a disappointment. And so I think B- is right in the sweet spot here because Ryan Neal has been fantastic. Quandre Diggs, I'm not going to say he's been terrible, but he just has not played up to the par that we're used to seeing from him. His usual performance has not been there. And Josh Jones has been better in a situational role. So his overall grades propped up in recent weeks. But this group's been solid, and maybe Joey Blount needs to be added here too, just with the special teams contributions that he's making for the Seahawks in year 1. So I'm going to go B-. I feel like this group could be better than they've been. Some of it's been injuries. Some have just been players like Quandre Diggs not quite matching expectations, but Ryan Neal has elevated the grade with his sensational play as of late.
Yeah, I think B-, C+, I think right around that realm, I think is, again, fair. And I think that it has very much been pushed ahead because of how well that Ryan Neal has played. As you just very nicely articulated there, similar to Uchenna Nwosu, similar to Al Woods and Shelby Harris along the defensive tackle positions. I just think that because Ryan Neal has played so spectacularly, then you have to kind of boost that grade up. But I have been disappointed by the lack of interceptions, one of the hallmarks of what Quandre Diggs has always done, and the iffy tackling. As you put there for our YouTube watchers, they were able to kind of see your wording there. And I think the iffy tackling has been, is a very good way of putting the way that Quandre Diggs has been. Has he given up the monster plays? Not very often. But at the same time, there have been some tackles that normally Quandre Diggs would have made that he has allowed players to kind of slip off of him. And so that to me is a concern. I don't know if there was a player that we were more excited about over the preseason than Josh Jones. So his play has been disappointing so far in this regular season. That's a concern to me, that he played as well as he did in the preseason, but then is very much leveled off here in the regular season. And obviously, we all know that Jamal Adams was expected to do great things, and of course has not been able to do so after getting injured in the week 1 victory over the Denver Broncos. I'm very, very encouraged by what I've seen from Joey Blount on special teams. I hope to see him a little bit more on defense, because I think that he's earned it, frankly. We talked about how well that he's played on special teams, but still, I think that without Ryan Neal, very similar to how I'd argue with Jordan Brooks, this safety group would really drop off if they weren't getting the spectacular plays, the consistent tackling, and no doubt about it, the big plays in terms of turnovers and things that Ryan Neal has provided this unit. I agree with you in that we thought that safety would be truly the strength of this team, and it has been very inconsistent. So to me, I think that B- C+ kind of range feels pretty fair for this group.
As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to check out Locked On Seahawks on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and streaming 5 days a week on YouTube. Coming up tomorrow, originally we were planning to do this today, and then we realized, wait, we haven't done our defensive report card yet. We're going to get to some predictions, what to expect in the second half of the season, which players need to step up for the Seahawks to finish off an NFC West title in the final 7 games of the season. Nick Lee and I are going to be diving into a number of prognosticative topics on our Blue Friday episode. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thanks for listening. Go Hawks.